Now, a very important thing when you're following is tying backup knots. This is especially important when you're doing traversing terrain. You tie backup knots because right now I'm just attached to the rope at 2 points. And often when cleaning gear, you're just, passing a piece, you're just attached at 1 point. And at that moment, there's a real chance that if this one comes undone, you're then going to go all the way to the end of the rope. In this case, I'd hit the ground. In most cases, on LCAP, you're going to hit a ledge and die, which has happened. So the reason you tie backup knots is to prevent that from happening. And there's 2 ways you can do this. One is you just take a locking beaner, and every 15 or 20 feet, you tie either an overhand or a figure-8 knot, and you clip it in. This means now if my ascenders were to fail, instead of falling to the end of the rope, I fall to my last backup knot. The other thing you can do is just use a gree-gree. Now, the gree-gree has its advantages in that in very rare cases on overhanging terrain, there will be so much weight right here that it'll actually feed itself. And as you're ascending the rope, you'll have almost a self-belay. Now, the downside to the gree-gree is that almost never happens. And what happens is you get a loop of rope, that looks like something like that, but a lot longer. So you'll go up, 15 or 20 feet, and then you have this giant loop of rope. It actually, I feel, is more effort to pull all the rope through the gree-gree as you go up than it is to just take the gree-gree off once you get to an end of the loop of rope and just put it back on. Now, another reason you tie backup knots, and a reason why backup knots can be a little better than a gree-gree, is you really want to keep from having the entire length of the rope hanging around, especially if it's windy. Because what'll happen is the rope will get blown around or it'll drag in some crack, and if you are, say, jumaring a 200-foot pitch on the nose and you're just about to get to the anchor and you haven't tied any backup knots and the rope gets stuck all the way at the bottom, you're then going to have to rappel 100 feet to unstick it, which actually happened to me on my first time on the nose, and led to me just getting not only a little demoralized but extra tired and got really bad cramps later in the climb. So the moral of the story is, if you have backup knots, you're going to be much less likely to get the rope stuck way down there. If it does get stuck, hopefully it'll just get stuck 15 or 20 feet below you. At that point, you can usually just flip it out, or worst case scenario, you just wrap down 15 feet instead of 100. Where backup knots are especially important is on traversing terrain. Almost all cases of where both jumars come off the rope and have either killed people or sent them on 150-foot falls is on traversing terrain where you pass a jumar past a piece, and because the rope's going at an angle, it causes this situation where the jumar is more likely to twist off the rope. And so what'll happen is you'll pass the piece, and while you're passing it, the other jumar will twist off the rope, and at that point you go sailing down to your last backup knot, or hopefully on a traversing terrain is where you put on a gree-gree to give yourself a close belay to prevent that from happening.